Maybe you've had a Nintendo Switch 2 since day one. Maybe you or your kids got one for a gift this past holiday season. Or maybe you still haven't picked one up and you're wondering whether Nintendo's powerful portable is right for you or not. Well, it's been 6 months since I picked mine up on launch day. Well, I didn't pick it up. The nice fella from Target brought it to me, but same difference. And after 6 months, I have to say, it's an awesome piece of tech, and I'm absolutely loving it while I'm playing it. But it sits on my shelf more than I thought it would for a new generation console. So today I'm going to talk a little bit about my impressions after 6 months of using this thing and who I think the Nintendo Switch 2 might be for in 2026. And there really are a lot of things that I love about Nintendo Switch 2. I mean, how could I not? I grew up in the 80s. Nintendo is basically in my blood. My love for Nintendo runs deep, and I've had every console since the NES and every portable since the Game Boy. And while as a Zennial gamer, my gaming tends to skew a little bit older than Nintendo first-party titles are usually known for, I still just can't shake that nostalgic feeling that I get when I'm booting up a Nintendo console and playing a new Mario game. And that gets me right to the first thing that I'm absolutely loving about Nintendo Switch 2, and that's the games. Games like Mario Kart World Tour, Donkey Kong Bonanza, Metroid Prime 4, these things are really just awesome gaming experiences that only Nintendo can deliver. And it's also been awesome to see what Nintendo Switch 2 can do for prior generation titles. The Nintendo Switch 2 editions of the games from the last generation are upgradable, usually at a really low cost, and they take advantage of the power of the new hardware in unique ways to either increase resolution, get frame rates more stable, and just give those Switch 1 games a level of polish that they weren't able to have on the previous console. But like most things that I'm reflecting on after 6 months of using Nintendo Switch 2, it's sort of a double-edged sword. Yeah, I'm loving the games, but at the same time, it feels like 2025 was kind of slight when it comes to first-party experiences that are just intended for the new hardware. And those first-party experiences that have been Nintendo Switch 2 exclusive have been stellar. They've taken advantage of everything that the new console has to offer, and they've unlocked some really cool new gaming experiences. But it just feels like the catalog isn't quite there yet. I'm really hoping that 2026 will change that because there's a lot of promise in the hardware. And the hardware itself really is awesome. This is one area where actually there aren't many compromises for me. I think that the Switch 2 is an improvement on Switch 1 in just about every way when it comes to the industrial design of the console. I mean, the screen is beautiful and it's noticeably bigger when you're playing in handheld mode, but at the same time, somehow the console almost feels lighter. It's genuinely kind of a marvel of design. And for an aging gamer like me, the Joy-Cons getting a little bigger was actually kind of a good thing. And the mechanisms of the Joy-Con on the Switch 2 are so much more satisfying than those on Switch 1. I mean, the ability to just snap these things on and off magnetically, it really is awesome, and it makes this satisfying click. It's just fun. I've always been a fan of the playful vibe of Nintendo hardware, you know, from the 80s and 90s inspired designs of NES and SNES to the lunchbox handle of the GameCube and to the modular nature of Switch 1 and Switch 2. There really is just such an incredible attention to detail and such a fit and polish that Nintendo brings to their industrial design. It's impossible not to be charmed by it. And that fit and finish, that level of polish that Nintendo is known for, it extends to the Switch 2 accessories too. The lineup is awesome with this generation. You know, for my dollar, the Nintendo Switch 2 Pro Controller is maybe the best of all the Pro Controllers out there, at least when it comes to the feel in the hand. And as far as I'm concerned, if you're any kind of adult gamer like me, you like playing games like Cyberpunk 2077, which is available on Nintendo Switch 2 and plays excellently, you're going to want to pick up a Pro Controller to really experience that game the way that it was meant to be experienced. That said, though, 6 months in, I still do feel like Switch 2 is just a little safe. The hardware is awesome, but it doesn't really make a big design statement beyond what Switch 1 was saying. And it feels like at least the home screen layout leaves a little bit something to be desired. I mean, I wish we had themes or some sort of customization. I mean, don't get me wrong, it's simple, it's elegant, it does the job, but it just doesn't have the same level of whimsy that the games themselves do. But while the look of the home screen hasn't changed much, a lot of the features of the software have definitely gotten better in this second generation of the Switch. You know, it really bears noting that the experience of playing online with Switch 2 has really improved, especially with Game Chat, which is a feature that I don't use myself, but everyone that I know that has kids who's picked up a Nintendo Switch 2, their kids are really loving this. I mean, kids are sort of used to connecting face to face over screens in a way that us Zennials and Millennials and Gen Xers growing up didn't know. And watching a kid duke out a Mario Kart World Tour race while he or she is looking at their friend right on the screen and they're harassing each other, having a good time, it really does kind of bring couch co-op gaming into the new generation in a way that almost brings me back to my friends and I sitting on the couch and razzing each other while we played the original Mario Kart back on SNES. And you know, it bears mentioning that in this generation, I'm still just loving Nintendo's delivery on the promise of a modular console. I mean, the Switch 2 plays so much better when it's docked now, being able to output in 4K. For my couch gaming, I play in the living room on a pretty big OLED display, and I would find sometimes with Switch 1 that games almost looked washed out or they didn't look quite right on the display, and that never happens with Switch 2. Everything looks sharp, everything looks vibrant. It's been a breath of fresh air, especially to see Nintendo Switch 2 editions of games looking so much better on my screen in the living room than they ever looked before. But I almost think that handheld mode has taken the bigger jump forward with Switch 2. I'm someone who had the OLED model of the Switch 1, and I'm a big fan of OLED screens with their inky blacks, but honestly, the LCD screen on the Switch 2 almost looks better to me. And the extra screen real estate, even if you don't notice it when you're just looking at the Switch 2, if you go back to game on Switch 1, you will notice it immediately. That extra screen real estate makes a meaningful difference when you're playing games in handheld mode, especially big open world games like Legend of Zelda, The Breath of the Wild, or Tears of the Kingdom, or again, like Cyberpunk 2077. That extra screen real estate really helps to make those games feel as immersive as they're meant to feel. And I gotta tell you about the thing about Nintendo Switch 2 that has delighted me and surprised me the most, and that's the ability to take either Joy-Con off the console and use it as a mouse for cursor control. I'm not a big keyboard and mouse guy when it comes to first-person shooters or open world games, but I love the ability to use a mouse for real-time strategy games, and I gotta say, being able to sit on the couch and use a Joy-Con on my thigh as a mouse for Civilization 7, it is a really, really fun experience and something that I've never been able to do with any prior console. Any fan of real-time strategy games knows that gamepad controls are never quite ported the way that you want them to be, so the ability to pop off a Joy-Con and have a mouse right there that you can use on a tabletop or even, like I say, just on your thigh, it's a really, really awesome bonus feature for this console. And it's on brand for Nintendo. Nintendo's always been known for pushing the envelope when it comes to human interaction with their consoles. So yeah, the hardware's awesome, if not a huge iteration on the last generation. And the games are great, even if the catalog is a little thin. And there's cool quirks and accessories for the console that make it really enjoyable to play. But it's worth reflecting on who the Switch 2 is for in 2026. If you're sitting at home and you're still thinking about buying one, I think it's important to really think about how it fits into your gaming life. Now, I don't have kids, but I'm a big old kid at heart. And so for me, a big part of the reason I got the console is just the ongoing nostalgia of Nintendo. So if you're someone that likes Nintendo, yeah, you should probably get a Switch 2. Or if you're someone that didn't ever get in on the Switch 1 generation, this is the generation to get in on. Switch 1 is still very much on the market and it's a lower cost console, but I don't think the difference in cost is worth not going with the current generation console. I think it's worth plonking down that extra money to get the piece of hardware that's capable of playing the entire Switch library, including Nintendo Switch 2 games. Another group of people that I think this console is really for is travelers. This day and age, a lot of people are traveling all the time for work, and it stands to reason that this is a great console for someone who's always on the go. And Nintendo really did commuters a favor with this generation of the Switch because the built-in kickstand is so much more rigid. I mean, you can take this thing on a plane now, prop it in front of you on a tray table. It's a really, really nice bit of design. But unsurprisingly, I think that the group that the Nintendo Switch 2 is most for are families. People that have kids at home, kids that like to game, and parents that like to game either alongside them or in their own right when the kids go to bed. The Nintendo Switch 2 in so many ways is a full family console in a way that the Switch 1 wasn't. I mean, the Switch 1, don't get me wrong, had great titles that everyone can enjoy. But there's no doubt that a lot of third-party developers that develop games more for kids my age weren't really all in on the Switch 1 because the hardware limitations didn't allow them to represent their games the way they want to be played. Switch 2 entirely fixes that. I mean, is it as powerful as a PS5 or an Xbox Series console? No, it's not. But is it more powerful than the PS4 and the Xbox One generation? It definitely is. And it can run games like Cyberpunk 2077, games that I like to play solo. It can run those games without much compromise. Looking at Assassin's Creed Shadows on my Switch 2 and comparing it to my PS5 Pro, yeah, you can definitely tell the difference, but not in a way that breaks the game, breaks immersion, or makes it an any less enjoyable experience to play. And I think that's huge for people who have kids at home, but who still want to engage in more adult style gaming. The Switch 2 delivers on that. It really makes it so that you can have this one console in the house that can serve all these different genres and interests across the gaming spectrum. So I think there's all sorts of gamers out there who, if they didn't pick up a Switch during its first year on the market, would probably be pretty satisfied if they picked one up now. You know, Nintendo has a really good roadmap for the year ahead, and there's such an awesome backlog of games. I mean, if you've been at home raising kids, there's probably a whole bunch of games that released for that first generation of the Nintendo Switch that you can now play at much higher fidelity and with much better performance and have a great time with. So is the Switch 2 the console that I'm playing most? No, it's not. I'm mostly playing PlayStation 5 and Xbox Series consoles, or now playing on my PC that I picked up recently. But the Switch 2 still has this delight and this charm that you can't get on those other consoles. So I think for a lot of families, it can and should be their principal piece of gaming tech at home. But for real serious gaming enthusiasts who are looking for a lot of power in their tech to be able to push incredible graphics on their consoles and drive really immersive experiences, the Switch 2 is probably, at least in my opinion, a better addition to your gaming world rather than being the principal centerpiece. If you picked up a Nintendo Switch last year or you got one over the holidays and you've been enjoying it, drop a line in the comments and let me know what your experience has been like. And don't forget to hit subscribe and like the video. It really does go a long way towards helping new creators get their videos in front of new audiences. Till next time, I'm Owen, the friendly Zennial Gamer. Thanks so much for joining me.